In a village forgotten by time, a silent drama unfolded under the merciless sun. An abandoned child, left to die, crawled through the dust of a bullfighting arena. Your destination? A massive bull, bleeding to death on the same ground. What happens when the purest innocence finds the most gross agony? The answer challenges the entire logic and lights the spark of a legend. This is not just the story of an unlikely meeting. It is the journey of a family undone by pain, a village divided by the fear and healing power of compassion that arises in the most unexpected hearts. The forged connection between the child and the beast would become a blessing, a miracle that would prove that hope can be born of pain and that families can be gathered by the most extraordinary ties. The small village was nestled under a merciless sun, a cluster of adobe houses and clay roofs that seemed to melt under the relentless heat. The air was thick with dust and the silence of the nap, broken only by the persistent buzz of the flies. In the forgotten center of the village, a bullfighting arena lay, a circular scar on the dry earth, where glory and brutality had already danced. The wooden benches were rotting. The colors of the party faded a long time ago, leaving only the spectrum of shouts and applause past. It was a place of memories, most of which the village preferred to forget, a monument to the passion and pain that defined so much of its history. The sun hit the naked sand, turning it into an oven, an empty stage where a new, silent, and deep drama was about to unfold, away from the curious eyes of the village inhabitants, which protected themselves from the heat from noon behind closed doors and running blinds, ignoring the miracle that was formed in their own backyard. The arena, a place of death, was about to become a cradle. In the center of the arena, a mountain of muscles and pain lay property. It was a bull, a magnificent copy of Black Coat, now stained with dry blood and dust. He had bravely fought at the last festival, a whirlwind of fury and strength, but in the end, man's ability and cold steel had won him. With a brutally torn flank and the force to fade, it had been left to die, a sacrificial victim for the entertainment of the crowd. His breathing was superficial. Every inspiration is a Herculean effort, each exhalation a soft moan of agony. Her eyes, once burning with wild fire, were now turf with pain and resignation. He was alone in his slow death, a king destroyed in his kingdom of dust, the heat to accelerate the inevitable end, the flies already claiming his powerful corpus as his own. The big head landed in the sand, the final surrender of a creature born to fight, now just waiting for darkness to complain to. Not far from the dying beast, next to the ruined wooden barrier, was a small bunch of cloth. It was not a bunch of garbage left behind after the festival, but something much more precious and tragic. Wrapped in the rags, a baby with no more than a few months of life slept a restless sleep. Her soft skin was covered by a thin layer of dust, her small heat-pink cheeks. Who would have left him there, and why? It was a mystery wrapped in the silent cruelty of the sun. Was it an act of despair, a mother unable to take care of her son, or something sinister? The baby was the embodiment of vulnerability, a small fragment of innocence abandoned on the verge of a place of violence and death. His soft crying had been faded in exhausted silence, his little life to be precariously hovering in balance, as vulnerable as that of the dying bull just a few feet away. A primordial instinct older than fear or reason stirred in the small being. Awakening from his heat-induced sleep, the baby began to move. It was not a cry for comfort, but a silent and determined impulse. His small legs and arms began to work, pushing and pulling his fragile body through the hot, rough sand. Each movement was a huge effort, a fight against its own weight and the relentless ground. There was no apparent direction in his crawling, just a move forward, a boost away from the place of his abandonment. His eyes, still learning to focus, did not see the danger that was ahead. It was a journey of pure need, a small soul to sail for a vast and indifferent world, driven by a force that it could not even understand, a force that guided it to the most unlikely and dangerous place in the whole arena. His slow pilgrimage took him directly to the dark and immovable mass of the injured bull. The distance, which seemed insurmountable to such a small being, was covered with a silent tenacity. The shadow of the great animal fell over the baby, a brief relief from the scorching sun, but also the foreshadowing of imminent danger. For any observer, the scene would be an unbearable suspense, the innocence to voluntarily crawl to the death jaws, the fragility approaching the brute force. The tension hovered in hot and immovable air, a silent drama to unfold on the forgotten stage. The inhabitants of the village, in their fresh homes, knew nothing of this convergence of the abandoned and the dying, a meeting of two lost souls in the center of his world, each facing his end, alone, so far. The small hand extended, about to touch the personification of the wounded fury. The moment of contact was a shocking stillness. The small hand of the baby, soft and covered with dust, landed gently in the rough, spotted coat of the bull's blood. There was no cry, not a jump, just a touch. For a moment, time seemed to stop in the arena. The bull, torn from his agony by this unexpected and kind sensation, shuddered. Below, deep moan vibrated from his huge chest, not anger, but something that sounded almost surprised. One of its heavy eyelids opened slightly, revealing a dark eye that settled, not in the baby, but in something beyond. The breathing of the animal hesitated and then resumed, a little more stable. The baby, feeling the strange texture under his fingers, did not go back. Instead, he nestled closer, finding a strange heat in the body of the dying creature. Instead of reacting with the aggression that would be expected from a wild and wounded creature, the bull remained passive, a statue of patient suffering. A subtle change occurred in your posture. His huge head, which rested defeated in the sand, turned slowly, millimeter, until his muzzle was a few inches from the baby's small body. It was not a threatening movement. On the contrary, it seemed protective, as if using their last strength to protect the child from the outside world. A strange calm came down on both of them. The beast, whose life had been defined by violence, was now offering comfort. The instinct, which would usually lead him to attack anything that approached his wounded space, was subdued by a deeper and inexplicable impulse to protect that short and helpless creature who had sought refuge with him. The first to witness this impossible scene was John, an elderly farmer whose Thursday was on the village's edge, overlooking the arena. He had gone out to check his cattle, worried about the heat, when his gaze was attracted to the center of the arena. His wrinkled eyes were semi-nicked, trying to make sense of what he saw. A dying bull, he expected, but the little figure nestled against him? He thought his eyes were fooling him. He approached the seal, his heart beating with a mixture of fear and astonishment. The vision was clear, a living baby pouring peacefully against the body of one of the most dangerous creatures he knew. His farmer's mind, used to the brutal rules of nature, could not process the scene. It was a picture that challenged all logic, a silent miracle to unfold into the merciless sun. John remained there, rooted in place, his breath trapped in his throat. His first instinct was shouting for help, running to the village, warning everyone. But something stopped him. There was a holiness in the scene, a deep tranquility that he was afraid to break. The silent communion between the defenseless child and the agonizing beast was something he felt that he had no right to interrupt. It seemed like a private moment, a secret shared between two beings at the limit of existence. He observed, fascinated, as the bull released another soft moan, and the baby fell asleep, giving further in the heat of the animal. John realized that he was not witnessing a prelude of tragedy, but something much deeper. He decided to wait, observe, and protect this secret for another moment, feeling deep in his soul that he witnessed to something sacred, an act of grace in the most unlikely place. In the immediate aftermath of John's discovery, the scene in the arena remained in a supernatural calm. The baby, now totally awake, did not cry. Instead, he lay in silent contentment, his small head backed against the huge bull muscle mass. His vulnerability was highlighted by the immensity of the creature by his side, but there was no sign of fear. On the contrary, there seemed to be a sense of security, as if the child had found the most unlikely guardian in the world. The sun began to descend into the sky, throwing long shadows on the sand, and the silence was so deep that one could almost hear the heart of the old John, who watched the other side of the seal, still fighting to believe what his eyes saw. It was a living picture of impossible contrasts, innocence and brutality, fragility and power, new life and imminent death, all linked by an invisible wire of tranquility. The bull's breathing, although still marked by the pain of his deep wound, had found a more stable pace. Each inspiration and exhalation seemed less a fight and another deliberate cadence. His big head remained facing the baby, a silent sentry. As the sun moved through the sky, the shadow of the bull moved with it, always keeping the child's body protected from the strongest rays. It was an act of instinctive and moving protection. The beast, which had been created for fury and fighting, was now using her massive body not like a weapon, but as a shield. The heat emanating from his feverish body was, for the baby, a source of comfort, a substitute for the warmth of a mother who had abandoned him. In his agony, the bull found a final purpose: to protect the little life that had taken refuge with him. The only sounds that broke the arena's heavy silence were the baby's soffits and rallies. They were sounds of contentment, exploration, while their small hands roamed the rough coat and the hot leather of his unexpected companion. These new life sounds were a stark contrast to the agonizing stillness of the bull. However, the creature seemed to respond to them. With every happy sound of the baby, a bull's ear moved towards him, a subtle recognition of his presence. It was a speechless conversation, a communication that transcended the barriers between the species. The baby, in his innocence, did not see a wounded monster, via heat, texture, and a soothing presence. And the bull, in his suffering, seemed to find a last glimpse of meaning in those gentle sounds of life. How to explain this impossible bond? It was a puzzle that challenged reason and biology. How could a creature synonymous with brute strength and territorial instinct display such a deep and protective tenderness? Lida bulls are created for aggression, conditioned to see anything moving as a threat. However, this, in its most vulnerable moment, chose compassion instead of violence. And the child? How could a human baby, instinctively programmed to seek the comfort and safety of a caregiver of his own species, find comfort in the presence of such a vast and potentially dangerous animal? Perhaps it was his sharing of abandonment and vulnerability that united them. Two lost souls finding an unexpected refuge in each other, in an arena that the world had forgotten. His bond was a mystery, a silent testimony that empathy can flourish in the most unlikely hearts. With an effort that must have cost him the last energy reserves, the bull used his muzzle to gently push the baby. It was not a push of rejection, but a gesture of adjustment, nestling the child closer to the curve of his neck in a protective hug. It was an act of such a shocking tenderness that it made the tears sprout in the eyes of the old John. The beast was using his strength not to destroy, but to take care. He was creating a safe nest for the baby, a sanctuary against the cruel world that had discarded them both. The baby responded with a happy gap, grabbing a handful of the bull coat with his tiny hand. It was a sealed pact, a silent agreement of mutual protection, understood only by them. Taurus' pain seemed to decrease in the presence of the child, and the fear of the child was non-existing in the presence of the bull. Slowly, attracted by John's whispered and incredulous story, who had finally found his voice and run into the village, other inhabitants began to arrive. They approached the arena with caution, one by one, and then in small groups. They maintained a respectful distance, lurking through the ceiling tablets, their faces a mixture of fear, astonishment, and a growing reverence. The whispers spread throughout the crowd. Some made the sign of the cross, others simply shaken their heads in disbelief. The scene before them was something out of a fairy tale or a sacred scripture. The baby's image, to sleep peacefully, guarded by the dying bull, silenced even the most cynical. The air was loaded with a collective astonishment, while the entire village became a silent witness to the extraordinary bond that had formed at its forgotten center. The symbolism of the scene did not go unnoticed by the inhabitants of the village, a people whose life was rich in tradition and faith. They saw the child's pure innocence, untouched by sin and suffering, and the agony of the beast, a creature of great power knocked down by the cruelty of man. The union of these two beings, in their shared abandonment, spoke to them at a deep level. For some, it was a divine sign, a miracle to reaffirm your faith. For others, it was a lesson about the nature of compassion, a reminder that kindness can be found where least expected. The arena, rather a place that celebrated man's domination over nature, became a stage for a lesson of humility. The image of the protective bull and the confident child began to record in the collective consciousness of the village the beginning of a legend. The child, who would later be named Valentine, was not afraid. For him, the world was simple. There was the cold of abandonment and the heat of comfort, and the bull was hot. It was a large, solid presence that protected him from the sun, and whose allialtar smell and rhythmic breathing packed him to a state of calm. In the bull's eyes, if he could have seen them clearly, he would not have found malice, but a reflection of his own loneliness. In that unlikely hug, the baby found the security and affection that had been denied to him. His little heart did not know the concept of monster or beast. He knew only the soft touch, the protective shadow, and the comforting sound of a heart beating beside his. For Valentine, the bull was not a beast, it was his first friend. This silent pact, forged in dust and pain, became the opening chapter of a new local legend. The story would be told and retold by generations, each narrator adding his own touch of admiration and astonishment. It would be the story of how compassion emerged from the heart of a creature born to fury and how innocence found refuge in the most dangerous place. The bond between the child and the beast has become a lasting testimony of the idea that empathy does not know limits of species, and that even in the midst of suffering and abandonment, the purest and most unexpected bonds may be born. The arena is no longer a symbol of death, to become a symbol of incomprehensible and miraculous love, which began with a simple touch of a small hand in the coat of a dying bull. The news of the baby and the bull spread through the village with the speed of a fire in Mato Seco. Initially, the reactions were of pure shock and unbelief. People gathered in small groups in the corners, the market, and the church door, their muffled voices in urgent whispers. Descriptions became more fantastic with each retelling, the bull bending before the child, the baby talking to the beast. The early wonder, however, quickly began to sour, turning into something darker. Fear, an ancient and deeply rooted emotion in the village psyche, began to take care. What was unknown was dangerous, and this situation was more unknown than anything they had ever found. Admiration gave way to suspicion, and the community, previously united in its astonishment, began to fracture under the weight of uncertainty and primordial fear. Some of the older inhabitants began to interpret the scene as a bad omen. An abandoned baby was already bad enough, a sign of difficult times and moral in decline. But a baby left in the care of a beast, a creature associated with blood, violence, and pagan rituals, was something totally different. They whispered on curses, evil spirits who could take the form of animals. The arena, a place of death, could not generate life, they argued. The bull was not a protector, but a deceiver, a demon to keep the child for some harmful purpose. The fear of the supernatural, always driving under the surface of his Christian faith, emerged in full force. They saw not a miracle of compassion, but an act of witchcraft, a bad omen that could bring disgrace to the whole village if it was not treated carefully and purged. The local priest, a man of simple faith but with a deep fear of the devil, was consulted. Stunned between the possibility of a divine miracle and the threat of a demonic trap, his words were cautious and ambiguous. He spoke in the mysterious way God operates, quoting stories of prophets and animals. But it also warned about the many devil's masks, how evil can be disguised as good to deceive the faithful. His homilies have become a maze of contrary warnings and hopes, leaving his congregation more confusing and anxious than before. Instead of offering clarity and leadership, its uncertainty only fueled the flames of superstition and fear. The village was divided. Was this a gift from God or a devil from the devil? The lack of a clear response from their spiritual leader left them to drift in a sea of speculation and dread. The news reached the ears of Maria and Manuel, a couple who lived in a small house on the outskirts of the village, wrapped in a shroud of silent mourning. Years earlier, they had lost their only son, a baby, for a sudden fever. The pain had never truly left them, that only been installed in their bones, a constant cold in their hearts. When Maria heard the whispers about a baby found in the arena, something stirred inside her. It was a feeling that she had not felt for a long time, a painful and electrifying mix of hope. She tried to crush her, telling herself that it was a foolishness, a dangerous fantasy. But the image of an abandoned baby, a baby who needed a mother, planted a seed in the arid soil of her pain. Would it be possible for fate or God was offering them a second opportunity? Manuel, on the other hand, reacted with fear and anger. The pain had made him pragmatic and bitter. He saw the world as a place he took, not that he gave. The story of the baby and the bull sounded to a dangerous fantasy, a foreshadowing of more pain. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. The idea of embracing a new hope was terrifying to him, because hope could be crushed, and he didn't think his heart could bear out to be broken again. It forbade Mary to talk about it, to feed what he called foolish fantasies. For him, the arena and his strange drama were a reminder of the cruelty of the world, not his miracles. To reopen the door to hope was to invite the pain to enter his house again, and he had locked this door for a long time. Heated debates echoed through the village. In the local tavern, men beat the fists at the tables, some arguing that the beast should be slaughtered and the child taken to an orphanage in the city. Others to insist that the scene should be left at peace, not to disturb anything that was happening. In the market, women whispered as they selected their vegetables, their opinions divided between fear and wonder. The central question was always the same. Was the baby a blessing or a curse? Was the bull a guardian or a monster waiting for the right time to attack? The village, usually a cohesive and quiet community, was in turmoil, divided by the most fundamental question of faith against fear, of miracle against superstition. The child and the bull have become a mirror, reflecting the hopes and deepest fears of the community. The village elders, the non-official council that guided the community in times of crisis, called a meeting. They sat in a circle in the village square, their wrinkled and serious faces under the afternoon sun. Their discussions were long and unsuccessful. The options were all bad. Trying to remove the child to force was risky. The bull, though injured, was still immensely powerful. It could react violently, killing the child and whoever approached. But leaving a human child in the care of a wild beast seemed an abdication of all human and moral responsibility. His paralysis was a reflection of village paralysis. Arrested between the fear of acting and the fear of not acting, they could not reach a decision, leaving the fate of the child and bull to hover in the balance. While the village debated and feared, Maria felt an irresistible attraction to the arena. It was stronger than his own reason, stronger than her husband's warnings. The whispers were not enough. She needed to see with her own eyes. One night, after Manuel dumb, she silently left home, a handkerchief covering her head, and went to the arena under the cloak of darkness. Fear accompanied it, a cold knot in the stomach, but was overshadowed by a deeper need, a need to understand, to witness what everyone said. She needed to know if the child was real, if the scene was as miraculous as some said, or as terrifying as others feared. Her very sleeping mother's heart was waking up and called her to the place that everyone else feared. The fear of the unknown had paralyzed the village, turning potential miracle into a source of anxiety and division. People saw what they wanted to see, a bad omen, a demon, a threat. But for Maria, the stranger contained something else. It contained the possibility, however small and terrifying, of redemption. It contained the weak glow of a second opportunity to be a mother, a chance to fill the overwhelming emptiness that your loss had left. As she approached the arena's ceiling, her heart was beating not only at fear, but also with a fierce and desperate hope. She didn't know what she was going to find, but she knew she had to face him. Because in that place of fear and uncertainty, she first felt the possibility of finding her way back to life. Upon reaching the edge of the Purest arena, Mary's heart was beating out against her ribs, a drum of fear and hope in the silence of the night. The full moon shed a ghostly light on the scene, making it even more surreal. She saw the massive outline of the bull and the little figure nestled against him. And then he heard a sound behind him. He turned, scared, and saw her husband's silhouette, Manuel. He had followed her. Her face was a mask of conflict, her anger to fight her concern for her. He said nothing, just stayed there, a reluctant witness to his wife's journey toward the unknown. Her presence, though silent, was a weight, but also a thread by the world thread she was leaving behind when she approached the scene she had captivated and terrified the village. His eyes fit the dim light, and the details of the scene became clear. The baby, whom the viewers already called Valentine, slept the sleep of the innocent, their little cheek pressured against the bull neck. The great beast, whom popular admiration had already baptized brave, seemed to be in guard. His breathing was deep and regular, and his posture, even lying down, was of protective surveillance. There was nothing threatening in its stillness. Maria saw not a monster, but a guardian. She saw a peace that challenged all logic, a harmony that silenced the fearful whispers of the village. At that moment, her fear began to dissipate, replaced by a wave of admiration and an emotion she did not expect to feel, a deep and overwhelming compassion. With a courage that she did not know she had, Maria went through an opening in the seal and entered the arena. His movements were slow, deliberate, not to scare his occupants. Raised his huge head as he felt his approach. Her big dark eyes fired on her, and for a moment Mary's fear returned. But there was no malice in his gaze, just deep tiredness and surprising intelligence. He let out a low moan, a no threat but pain. He did not move to attack it or to move away. He only observed it, as if he were evaluating his intentions. And Mary, looking at that magnificent and wounded creature, knew what she had to do. Her very repressed caregiver instinct came to the surface. It was then that she clearly saw, in the moonlight, the horrible wound on the bull flank. It was inflamed and infected, a source of obvious agony. Compassion flooded it, erasing the last traces of fear. This was not a monster to be feared, but a creature to suffer, a creature who, despite his own excruciating pain, had found in himself the ability to protect an even more vulnerable being. His mother's heart extended beyond the child to also embrace the suffering beast. At that moment, she did not see a bull and a baby. He saw two abandoned beings, both desperately in need of care and kindness. Your decision was made. She couldn't simply observe. I had to help. I had to try to heal this pain. Without hesitation, Maria turned around and left the arena. Manuel took a step toward her, thinking she was backwards, returning to reason. But she passed him with a look of determination that silenced him. She was not running away. He was preparing for battle. He ran to his small home and gathered what he needed, moving with a purpose that he had not felt for years. A bucket of clean water from the well, the softest cloths you could find, and a pot of herbal ointment that your grandmother had taught him to make, an old recipe for wounds and infections. They were simple tools, but in their hands they became instruments of deep faith in healing and compassion. I was coming back, not only for the child, but also for the beast. Manuel tried to stop her when she left home with her groceries. "Maria, are you crazy?" he begged, his voice hoarse with fear. "It's a wild animal. He will kill you." He grabbed his arm, his face a desperate supplication so that she would not risk her life, the only thing left to her. But Mary looked at him, and in his eyes he saw something he hasn't seen since before his son's death. A flame. A fierce resolution. a force of mind that he thought was extinct forever. She loosened gently from her squeeze. "He is suffering, Manuel, and he is protecting that child. I can't leave them that way." His words were simple, but loaded with the weight of years of repressed pain now being transformed into action. She approached the bull again, this time speaking of soft, soothing tones, the same voice he had used years earlier to pack his own son. Brave watched her, her head still raised, but her muscles seemed to relax slightly to the sound of her voice. She knelt beside her, plunged a cloth into the water, and with a surprisingly firm hand, began to clean the edge of the wound. The bull shuddered with the touch, a tremor that traveled his whole body. A moan escaped him, but he remained motionless, seemed to understand his intention. He seemed to know that this little human was not there to hurt him, but to relieve his pain. It was an act of amazing confidence and surrender of the beast to the kind touch of compassion. While Maria worked, applying herbal ointment to the wound carefully and tenderly, the baby woke up, watching Maria's face hover over him, bathed in the moonlight. Her small arms extended, not to the bull, but to her. At that moment, in the middle of the Pueda arena, under the watchful eye of a wounded bull, a new connection was forged. Maria took the child, holding her against her chest, and the baby nestled in her heat as if she belonged there. Brave watched the scene and lowered her head back to the sand, a deep sigh coming out of her chest. It was a sigh not of pain, but of relief. His guardian duty had been passed to someone he trusted. The three were now linked: the woman who needed to heal, the child who needed a mother, and the beast who needed compassion. On the other side of the seal, Manuel watched, paralyzed. Tears ran freely down his face, tears he hadn't cried for years. The pain and fear in your heart gave way to overwhelming astonishment. He was not just seeing his wife taking care of a strange child and a dangerous animal. He was witnessing the rebirth of his wife. He was seeing the return of Mary he loved, the woman whose care was her greatest strength before morning was closed. In that arena, he saw the possibility of a future he dared to imagine. He saw the cure not only of the bull wound, but also the wound in his wife's soul. And for the first time in a long time, he saw the possibility of a new family. The days became a week, and a quiet routine settled in the arena. Mary spent her days there, a figure of silent devotion. Under his constant care, what seemed impossible began to happen. Vallente's wound, the great bull who once looked like a death sentence, began to heal. The inflammation gave way, the flesh began to regenerate, and a clean crust formed about what was once an open wound. The bull fever has dropped, and his breath became strong and regular. It was a miraculous recovery, fed by both Mary's herbs and her soothing presence. The force was slowly returning to that massive body, living proof of the power of compassion and persistent care. The arena, a place of death, was witnessing a resurrection. The baby Valentine flourished under Mary's attentive gaze. She fed him with goat milk that the neighbors now left in the seal, packed him until he fell asleep, and sang the same packs of packing that he had sang to his own son. He was a happy and healthy child, his days divided between Mary's loving arms and the protective shadow of her first friend, Brave. His world was this unlikely sanctuary: the smell to dry earth and hay, the heat of the sun filtered by the bull's massive body, and the soft sound of the voice of a woman who had become her mother in everything but in the name. The trauma of his abandonment was being erased by a torrent of love and security, built on the strangest foundation than one might imagine: Over the days, Valente's force returned remarkably. First, he managed to rise on the four paws, though unstably, his legs shaking with the effort. Then he began to take a few steps, exploring his small room. He never moved much of Mary or Valentine, her presence a constant and silent guarantee of protection. His gaze was no longer cloudy in pain, but clear and intelligent. He watched Maria's movements with a palpable gratitude and followed little Valentine with a kind and attentive look. The wild beast had been tamed, not by strength or fear, but by an act of kindness. He was living proof that gratitude could exist in the heart of a beast. The village observed this transformation with a silent and growing astonishment. The voices of fear and superstition were silenced by the undeniable reality of what was happening. The whispers about curses were replaced by murmurs of a miracle. People began to see Maria not like crazy, but as a saint. They began to leave gifts in the arena seal, not only milk for the baby, but also hay boundaries, fresh bread, and fruit for Maria. The arena is no longer a place to be avoided and became a pilgrimage point. People came to witness the scene, to feel some of the peace and hope emanating from that unlikely trio. The fear of the village had turned into reverence. Brave, the bull that had been brought to the arena to die, became a powerful symbol of unexpected resilience and grace. Its history redefined the meaning of the arena to the village. It was no longer a place that celebrated the violence and domination of man. It had become a healing and rebirth, a place where the wounds, both physical and emotional, could be treated. The image of the bull, now pasting peacefully beside the woman who saved him and the child he protected, became an icon of hope. He taught the village a lesson that no sermon could convey, that the truest force is not in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to protect and heal. Inspired by the transformation of his wife and touched by the scene he witnessed every day, Manuel finally broke his paralysis. He joined Mary in the arena, his heart finally opening himself. He began to help take care of Brave, bringing him fresh water and cleaning his space. With his own hands, he began to repair the arena seal, not to imprison the bull, but to protect him from any danger of the outside world. It was his act of redemption, his way of participating in the miracle that his wife had begun. When working alongside Maria, taking care of her strange and new family, the ice that had formed around her heart finally began to melt. He was learning to wait again. With the hearts full of a love they thought never to feel, Maria and Manuel made the decision that seemed inevitable and correct. They went to the village magistrate and began the baby adoption process. They officially named him Valentine, a permanent tribute to the brave bull who had been his first protector. His family, who had been shattered by pain, was being rebuilt as part around this unexpected gift. The laughter of a child echoed again in his house, and the silence of the morning was replaced by the happy stirring to take care of a child. The blessing they had received was so great that he embraced not only the child, but also the creature who had brought them to their lives. The day came when Valente was completely healed. His wound was now just a long silver scar, a reminder of his trial. He was once again a magnificent specimen, his hair shining under the sun, his muscles corroded with renewed power. However, something in it had changed forever. The wild fire in his eyes had been replaced by calm and kind wisdom. Its aggressive nature had disappeared, leaving behind a kind giant. He could have departed, jumped the seal repaired, and returned to nature, but he chose to stay. His place was there with his family. Valente's legacy would not be that of a fierce fighter in the arena, but that of a silent guardian and a loyal friend. He remained with his family, a constant and reassuring presence in his backyard, which now included the old arena. He watched Valentine grow, always close, a vigilant protector. Its story has become the heart of the village legend, a tale on how love can be born of pain and how compassion can redeem and heal. His legacy was a silent testimony of a deep love that saved not only a child, but healed an entire family and inspired a community to believe in the impossible again. The years passed like the stations, transforming the landscape of the village and the lives inside it. Valentine grew up and became a strong, good-hearted boy, his eyes having wisdom that seemed older than his age. His childhood was different from any other village boy. Instead of dogs or cats, his constant companion was Brave, the magnificent bull. It was Brave that he learned his first lessons about the natural world. He learned the language of silence, the importance of patience, and the strength that resides in kindness. His connection with the great animal was deep and unshakable, a bond forged in miraculous circumstances that defined the course of his life in ways he was just beginning to understand. Maria and Manuel never overloaded Valentine with the full and painful history of their abandonment. For him, his story began the day he found his family, a family that included not only a loving mother and father, but also a bull as an older brother. His world was filled with his parents' unconditional love and Valente's firm and protective presence. He did not know the emptiness of abandonment, only the fullness of being dear. The love surrounding him was a powerful shield that protected him from the shadows of his unknown past, allowing him to grow safe, confident, and with an innate capacity for empathy, especially to creatures that could not speak for themselves. Family history became the most beloved tale of the village, a living legend that was told of children and grandchildren on the fireplace on cold nights. It was a lighthouse of hope, a tangible reminder that the greatest blessings of life often arise disguised as pain and tragedy. The story of Mary, Manuel, Valentine, and Valente taught the village that faith is not only in the church, but also in acts of courage and compassion. He taught them that the family is not defined only by the blood, but by the bonds of love and care. And above all, he taught them to seek miracles in the most unexpected places, because it was in a place of death their community found a lasting lesson about life. The arena, once a symbol of violence and oblivion, has been completely transformed. Under the guidance of Manuel and Mary, it became the pulsating heart of the community. The ruins were repaired and the dusty soil was transformed into a lush community garden, where the inhabitants of the village cultivated vegetables and flowers. Part of the arena was converted into an abandoned animal sanctuary, a safe refuge managed by the family. The place that had been the scene of a lone miracle became a place of daily miracles of growth, healing, and community. It was a living testimony of transformation that compassion can inspire, a lasting legacy of the faithful encounter between a child and a bull. Valentine absorbed the lessons of compassion, not through words and sermons, but through the daily example of his parents and his giant friend. He saw the way his mother took care of plants and animals injured with the same tenderness. He saw the way his father worked tirelessly to maintain the sanctuary, treating each creature with respect. And he felt the unshakable kindness of Valente, a being of immense power that he chose to use his strength only to protect. These lessons shaped their character, instilling a deep respect for all life. He became the living personification of the Taurus legacy, proof that true strength manifests itself in goodness. The bond between the boy and the bull continued to be a source of admiration and astonishment for all who witnessed him. They had a form of communication that transcended the words. Valentine spent hours leaning against Valente's hot flank, telling her his secrets, and the bull responded with a soft look or a touch of his muzzle. There was absolute confidence between them, a mutual understanding that was as natural as breathing. Brave, who had been the guardian of baby Valentine, was now the confidant of the boy Valentine. His bond was a constant reminder of the magic that had joined his lives, a golden thread that roamed the tapestry of his family's history. The pain that Maria and Manuel had carried for so many years for the loss of their first child never completely disappeared. It was a scar in their hearts, a reminder of what they had lost. But the pain was softened and transformed by the immense joy that Valentine brought to his lives. The love they felt for him did not replace love for the son who lost, but expanded their hearts, making them capable of containing both pain and joy. Valentine did not fill the hole that the loss had left. Instead, he helped them build a new life around him, a life rich in love, purpose, and gratitude. He was the balm that healed his deepest wounds. The family, which once defined by absence and mourning, found a new identity. They were now defined by the extraordinary love they had found and cultivated from a moment of shared vulnerability in the dust of a forgotten arena. Their story was not about what they had lost, but what they had won: a son, a purpose, and a deeper understanding of the redeeming power of love. They have become a lighthouse in their community, proof that even the most destroyed families can be gathered and made whole again, sometimes from the most miraculous and unexpected ways. The culmination of its history was not a grand event or a dramatic climax, but the serene beauty of your daily moments of happiness. It was the sound of a boy's laughter echoing through the garden as he leaned against his best friend, the bull whose silver scar shone in the sun. It was the look of love and contentment in the faces of Maria and Manuel as they watched their son and guardian. It was the peace of a family that had traveled through unimaginable pain to find unimaginable joy. It was the simple and deep image of a gathered family, a circle of complete love, a silent miracle born of pain that forever flourished in the sunlight.